Alright everyone, we lead off today with something that's more amusing than anything. Biden is becoming less coherent by the day. There's only like 4 days to go till election day, or 3 or something, depending on the time zone. I'm in Amsterdam. The other day he was holding a rally. And it's funny, he had like pumpkins behind him and everything, so it's like spoopy. And it's like Joe Biden, he doesn't need to wear a costume because he always looks like a zombie anyway, like he just crawled out of a crypt. Especially that one time he was in Pennsylvania, and I guess they didn't have time to put his makeup on beforehand, and the lighting was wrong. He looked like he was literally rotting. It's very interesting. I'm going to try to pronounce a word that doesn't exist, and Biden promises that he's going to mobilize this, I think in context of COVID. And if you look, actually, link in the description, you can see his statement. Look at the comments, and there are like 1,000 different people there trying to interpret what he said and figure out what he actually meant. Because he tried to say like 3 or 4 words at once, so it's not even clear. Now, I'm going to try to pronounce it and butcher it anyway, but it doesn't matter because that's literally what Biden did. Trunalimunumaprzure, or something like that. So he's going to immobilize this against, I guess, coronavirus. Or for the economy or something. It's not entirely clear in the context. We've gotten used to Biden saying weird things, and it's like to the point where this sort of thing, when he just mashes his words together, it almost seems innocuous and it's just like lighthearted and funny, because sometimes it's much more severe. Sometimes it's more like he forgets he's running for the presidency, or he refers to himself as his own wife or something like that. Like, frequently, I think 3 times now, in the last 6 months or so, I think 3 different times he's announced that he's running for the U.S. Senate instead of the presidency. When a 78-year-old man starts making that kind of mistake under normal circumstances, in normal, like in a family situation, you got an aged, literally elderly, he's over 75, relative. He starts confusing the year. He starts occasionally forgetting where he is. He starts apparently regressing into the past and not doing it as a joke. When that sort of, and getting combative sometimes with other people, even people that are softballing him. When these things happen, usually you schedule an appointment at the doctor's office. It's that person, if they've got Alzheimer's, usually they want to get their affairs in order before they're too far gone. It's just sort of a thing. Like, if I start having, if I'm 75 years old, which, may or may not ever even happen, and I start forgetting where I am, if I start calling myself Razor Fist or something, people will probably be like, hey, Sticks, you need to get checked out, dude. You need to put your affairs in order because you're fucked. Normally that's what happens, but it sounds like everyone around Joe Biden just sort of ignores it. And he wasn't like this before, and this is what people, if you've got Trump derangement syndrome and you care about the election, or if you're just sort of watching CNN in general or something, and you're out to lunch, you're a soccer mom, middle American, a lot of people seem to be under the delusion like they've actually been fed the bullshit that Joe Biden always had a speaking problem, that he's trying to cover up a stutter, and that when things like this happen, it's just a stutter. But I can look at literally dozens and dozens of hours of interviews and speeches that he's made in front of the Senate, various committees, as vice president. He was never like that. Yes, he was gaffe prone. In the sense, like, remember the hot mic moment where he told Obama, this is a big fucking deal, and stuff like that, and Obama was visibly angry at that. And he was just sort of seen as a little bit of a bumbler, like sort of like a Gerald Ford character or something. He was seen as like bumbling, and occasionally he'd say something, he'd crack a joke or act in a way that was sort of court jesterish. But he was never known to be incoherent and bad verbally in general. He could deliver a speech. 10 years ago, Biden could deliver a speech. He'd make 1 or 2 mistakes like any politician in that age range, but it wasn't anything significant. Trump does that too. Trump, meanwhile, if you want to compare it, because whenever you bring this up on like a Biden thread or something, the Biden babies will come out and say, use the whataboutism and say, well, Trump's the one that's incoherent. Well, look, I can look back at Trump's speaking style, and it's been remarkably consistent. It's really no different than it's always been. He's sort of always been like that because he has that, I'm better than you boardroom mentality. Biden, to his credit, actually, at least as a senator and early on in the vice presidency, was actually a very good public speaker. He was actually a very good debater. He did a good job by all accounts. He's not the same Joe Biden he was even 5 years ago, certainly not 10. When he was a spring chicken of only like 67 or something, when he was more like, the Trump or Hillary's age when they were running in the last election, when they were spring chickens, and we were having a national conversation about whether it was appropriate to have two candidates for the presidency pushing 70. Now we've got one that's pushing 80 and another one pushing 75. I would think that this should be a conversation. It was important last time around, but because of Trump derangement syndrome, nobody's willing to point to the elephant in the room, which is that the Democratic candidate has Alzheimer's disease. He has dementia and memory loss issues, quite clearly. This is more on the funny side. This, you can lie and pretend that this has to do with his non-existent stutter if you really want to. But it happens more and more frequently. My biggest worry, if Biden wins, I'm not worried about Biden. His record is consistent. Up until like 6 months ago, he was a principled moderate. Tough on crimer, actually. One of my biggest problems with him would be he was too far right on crime. Wanted to throw potheads in jail for life sentences. No shit. Economically, just sort of center-left. Not taken in by the New Green Deal bullshit. Sparred with Bernie on these things. And there's plenty of footage of Bernie and Omar and all these other people, including Kamala herself, saying that he had bad racial views, he was too soft on guns, he didn't want to tax the rich enough, and stuff like that. He's in the pocket of fossil fuel, and he agrees with Trump on a certain issue, and therefore he's evil too by proxy. And it was funny to see that. Now they've all completely forgotten about it. There are people on the left that still think that if they just rabble-rouse a little bit, like the skeptic crowd is like, well, we can't go to brunch if Biden wins, we just need to yell about things and don't let up. And it's not going to happen, dude. Even if you have another Occupy movement, you're not going to get anything. Did Occupy accomplish jack shit? That was way bigger than any left-wing movement that you're going to get today. Right now, you've got a scattered bunch of anarchists and communists taking advantage of every police shooting to whip people up into a frenzy to go riot and loot. That's basically what the left has devolved into. Absolutely not going to get anywhere under a Biden presidency. You'd be better off trying to negotiate with Donald Trump. That's the tragic irony of it, is that these people don't understand political strategy. Biden, meanwhile, my greatest fear is he wouldn't really be running the country. Nor, by the way, would Kamala Harris. There are some people, mostly on the right, they're like, well, Kamala Harris is the one that'll be president, and that's scary. Kamala Harris talks a big game, but ultimately her record was similar to Biden's when she was, sort of doing her thing as prosecutor in the earlier days. She's gone far to the left more lately, but she did that as political posturing. I don't think that as VP she's going to have much leverage at all, because the people behind the scenes that control Biden control her too. She wouldn't be the running mate if she didn't accede to their wishes. The deep state, the swamp, that's what you're looking at, quite literally. It's the sort of people, like Joe or Kamala, who will throw you in prison for 10, 20 years for having a joint. But if Hunter Biden smokes crack and has an orgy with underage prostitutes in China, there's no investigation, nobody cares. This is the establishment. This is the rules for thee, not for me hypocrisy that we've seen from DC for a very, very long time. That's literally what you see. Biden being out to lunch is concerning from mainly a diplomatic perspective. How can you expect the chief executive, let's say that even if he's taking his marching orders from people that kind of know what they're doing, how can he go into a room with Xi Jinping and spend an hour bantering with him and trying to get something accomplished? He'll forget what the fuck he's talking about. He'll have to have like 2 earpieces in just to hold a conversation. How's he going to deal with Vladimir Putin? Certainly, how's he going to deal with issues in some of the flashpoints of the world? Venezuela, Korea. How's he going to deal with these things? He's literally out to lunch. We may laugh at this, but it's far more concerning ultimately at the end of the day. That's about all. Peace out.